Hello, everyone. A very good afternoon and welcome to this very topical discussion on rising demand of engineers, the ultimate guide to select the right employer. I'm Pooja Bothra, Senior Content Lead ETHR World, and your host for this session. We have the titans from the technology industry who will share the strategy, experiences, and journeys of attracting and hiring engineers in this polarized, candidate-driven marketplace. This way, we will be able to make a few notes about what considerations play a vital role in influencing an engineer's decision to select a potential employer. Also, how are employers redesigning the organizational fabric to create flexible structures, develop a people-first culture, and nurture entrepreneurship qualities amongst the workforce? The panel will guide you on what points are of consequence while selecting the next employer. So viewers, welcome once again to this session and take this opportunity to interact with the panel, get your questions answered. There is a Q&A tab on your screen. Please use that tab to engage with the audience. You can put your questions here. You can put your thoughts as well as feedback using this tab, and we will take your questions right from the beginning of the session. I now would like to introduce the eminent panel to all of you. Please join me in welcoming Vivek Khare, Director IT, Verse Innovations; Vinod Madinoor, Director of Engineering, Good Worker; Dale Vaz, CTO, Swiggy; and Amit Sharma, CTO, Dream Sports. Welcome to this session, all of you, and I really look forward to an engaging conversation with you all. In this post-COVID era of high-tech businesses, the technology workforce has seen a northward curve in job opportunities and open positions. A recent study by a recruitment company tells us that 8 out of 10 employers are actively hiring in industries such as banking, insurance, finance, e-commerce, and IT/ITS. Within this spectrum, there is a significant demand for technology-based talent who are becoming very selective. Now, I would want experts from the panel to tell me how much is this true? I mean, you are there in the industry. You are the best people to tell us how true is this statistics. And it'll be great if you share an overview on how this sector hiring for this cohort has changed over the last 1 year. Vivek, some thoughts from you on this.
Sure. Thanks, Pooja. Let us understand what happened in the last 1.5 years that changed the century-old, I will not say decade-old, century-old traditional process of hiring people. This is the first time I am seeing that the tables have turned and employees the candidates are in demanding position and not the employers, right? This is good. This is good. Now, coming to the fact that why do we think that there is a challenge in hiring talent? Couple of facts. One, traditional offer rejection percentage, which used to be 23%, 25% at max, has now gone up to 55%. These stats are available on the internet, so I will not bore you with the references, but that is true. Now, second thing is offer shopping. Earlier, the candidates on an average, if they had one offer, they will look for second. Now, I am seeing personally that there are people who are coming with 2 offers, 3 offers in hand, and they are still shopping to get better options, right? And mind you, here I want to put one advanced thought. I just want to seed this idea to our audience that it is not about money. Candidates have become very smart, very focused, and I am loving it. Why? Because they know what they are looking for. It is not the money only, it is the innovation, it is the freedom to do, it is the technology stack that they are going to work on, it is the vertical Now they have the freedom to choose from. Earlier, you're a software engineer, whether you are working in an e-commerce company, you are working in a manufacturing organization, or you are working in any other brick and mortar organization, does not matter. Now people know, okay, I want to go into gaming, I want to go into media, I want to go into a particular sector. All these things combined with the fact that companies are trying to hold their top talents very closely, they cannot afford to lose them, has also caused a crunch in the market of the talent, right? Pandemics also caused one more, I would say it's a dual-edged sword. Earlier, people were limited to their physical location to work. But the moment work from home came into the picture, the work from remote locations came into the picture. Now you have availability of talent pool. Let me give an example. Say I'm sitting in Bangalore. Earlier, if I was interviewing a candidate sitting in Delhi, sitting in Assam, sitting in Kolkata, was difficult because they were perhaps not willing to relocate if they were not open to relocation already. But today that limitation is removed. So the entire market for me is open to hire from any location. At the same time, this is the dual-edged sword I was talking about. For them also the market has opened. Now they are not limited only to Delhi, Bangalore, Bombay, right? They can look for the markets anywhere. That has also caused a crunch in the market space.
Very interesting points there, Vivek, and I like, the tables have turned and they've turned to a very good direction. They're facing the sun now. So, we have to make the most of it. And also, it's about freedom. It's not only about money. And I think engineers or tech talent is looking to pursue their passions. So they will align their personal, aspirations and passion to what the organization's, purpose and goal is. Amit, some points from you on this. And also, I would like to ask you beyond that is, what are some of the challenges you have faced and how are you solving them?
Sure. So I think what Vivek said is absolutely correct, right? So I think now it's, as they're coming out of the pandemic, it's very interesting to see the dynamics. What's on one side, there are candidates who are reevaluating everything in their lives, what they want to do, where they want to live, what kind of importance work plays in their lives. And on the other hand, there are all the organizations are trying to figure out what is the right structure for them. Some of them are going completely remote, and some are trying some hybrid strategies, flexibility. Some are sticking to the same old, philosophy. So it's like a very interesting time, and it's going to be like a matchmaking of sorts now for the next few months till we all zero down into a few new models that will come. So traditionally, there was just one model, right, primarily, other than the MNCs of the world. But now there are going to be a few models, and people are gonna like matchmake. Okay, these are the kind of work policies that I have, and these are the kind of candidates that fit, and that's I think that's going to happen. One thing I wanted to add to Vivek's point was, candidates are aspirational, but there's also FOMO, fear of missing out, and it's happening on two fronts. One, on wealth creation, and on learning. So on wealth creation, also people are like constantly being like reading the news and figuring out, oh, I should have been here. I've, my batchmates have joined this company. Maybe I'm not at the right place. I need to go somewhere where I can go very fast and make some wealth. Maybe this time will not come. I don't know how long the bubble will last. On the other hand, because there's so many opportunities, so many different domains, after spending like 1.5 years, people start feeling that, am I learning? They're constantly, there was always this thing of, am I learning? But that time is shortening now. So the depth, before the depth is reached, people start getting this thing like, oh, am I learning enough? Should I move to another place and learn something else? So, there's some, I think that engineers need to take a step back and think about that a little bit. So that's the other side of the story. As far as challenges is concerned, it's hiring and retention, right? I mean, that's the challenge that all of us are facing in today's market. As startups, we don't invest in very big teams. We like to be lean. And so the outcome of that is that a few set of engineers, a couple of people, they own very important systems. And when the attritions are low, for Dream11, for example, we are blessed that because of our culture, composition, whatever, our attrition has always been single digits. So we don't create, or we have never invested a lot in redundancies of sorts for different people, so that multiple people own systems, etc. Because you want people to have larger impact, learn a lot of things, contribute to a lot of things. So now that we're looking at the entire scenario, we are re-looking at everything. And how do you solve for these, right? I mean, these challenges, I think first and foremost is by culture, to be very honest. I think of all the things that you provide. If your culture isn't good, then it doesn't matter what kind of wealth creation happens or work, you are not going to have high retention of your employees, right? So that's the first and foremost thing. I'm not going to talk about wealth creation, I think that's like a checklist today. Anyone who doesn't offer good compensation and all of that, people won't even consider. So that's a given. But other than that, what I've also realized is that you have to invest in the future. So you have to go and start at the grassroots, get talent from colleges, freshers, junior people, and use your experienced folk, your core team, which is lean and has really built complex systems, take their knowledge and distribute and invest in the future, so that when the senior layer starts looking for more opportunities, you have the next generation coming in, so that multi-year planning is like important. I think that's one other aspect that we've done. And also, as we move to flexibility, we have to figure out the infrastructure to how to make it work. When should we meet? How should we meet? Zoom in every room, and then which meetings should be done in person? How do we collaborate when half the team is here, and different models? So all of that. So we invested heavily in that, also trying to figure out the right model in which to work with. So these are some of the things that we're actually doing.
Great points there, Amit. And you rightly mentioned FOMO, fear of missing out. So I'd like to tell all the viewers who've joined in late that the panel is here. Please share your questions. Make the most of this panel to calm your nerves and not, have this fear of missing out, because, they are here to guide you. And also amazing attrition data there, Amit, because, all the talks of the great resignation, that can be put to rest when you hear about a single digit attrition rate in your organization. That's also amazing.
Yeah, so honestly, just a caveat, that was pre-pandemic. I mean, it's bumped up a little, right? 12, 13, 14, maybe, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's still like controlled, right? But for us, I'm saying pre-pandemic, we were used to like single digits, right? Which is probably not the norm in the industry, but we've been blessed with that.
Yeah, the disruption has actually taken place after the pandemic, I think, and I think it's more there in the Western world. I don't know to what extent is applicable in India. So now the question is, what do engineers want from their employers? This is a burning question inviting introspection from all potential employers looking to hire A+ engineers in the current hyper candidate driven market. Is it providing engineering teams with projects on cutting edge of technology that helps them inspire their best efforts and play a critical role in the ecosystem and also career development opportunities? But most employers, more often than now, find it difficult how to convey that message and how to stand out. So my question to you, Dale, is what is your strategy to entice and hire the best candidates?
Thanks, Pooja. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. So as Vivek and Amit both talked about, I think the dynamics over the last year and a half have completely changed for all of us. And I guess it has taken many of us leaders to go back to the drawing board and rethink deeply on that question that you asked, Pooja, as to what really makes for a great culture, a great environment under which engineers want to thrive and grow. And at Swiggy, what we've done is we've kind of built this engineering work culture around 4 C's, if you may. Right? We call them 4 C's strategy, which is culture, we have communication, we have career, and finally we have compensation. And these are maybe in different dimensions. Obviously, they are important for different aspects of people. What we found is to really be able to retain and grow top talent, you have to provide an environment where, in our opinion, builders can do the best work possible. That's kind of our focus. We focus on the inputs and we say, what do we do to make sure that somebody who wants to really do the best work possible of their life can make that happen at Swiggy? And as we work backwards from that question, the things we've done along these 4 dimensions are a few things. For example, on the culture part, a key part of our culture is focusing on how do we become an engineer-led culture. A lot of companies maybe have been more traditional, where they focus on managers and top-down decision-making. So at Swiggy, we've worked to say, how do we change the way people work so that the actual decisions are being made by engineers on the ground? We've reorganized the entire company into what we call streams, where each stream is a very mission-driven focus area. And each stream basically has a scorecard of metrics that they work on and a stream contains product managers, engineers, maybe analysts, scientists. And this stream is then working pretty autonomously on focusing on how to solve for that problem. So now it gives more power to engineers on the ground to be able to influence product roadmaps, to be able to kind of guide direction of the company. Similarly, when you think about communication, which is the second C, one of the things we realized is that we really need to communicate. And in fact, in the new post-pandemic world of hybrid working, we have to over-communicate to our employees. So we focused a lot on trying to provide people clarity about where the company is heading. We have monthly tech town halls where we talk about the different goals that we're working on. We make sure that we also talk a lot about key performers, rewards and recognition, also listening very carefully to what employees are saying. For example, we have a very robust Q&A forum where every month we get some really hard-hitting questions from our team, and we have a very transparent way in which we answer them. And we make sure the communication lines are open and we are taking action on things that people are observing and commenting on. The third C, which is interesting for us, is on the career aspect of it. And I think that's a very big shift that we made at Swiggy, which has really helped us. Typically, career development is almost something that either employees depend upon their managers, or in some cases, employees feel it's a very opaque process where they have no control over how their career grows. And we've tried to move that from being an opaque process to being a career and a coaching-led conversation. So at Swiggy, for example, we have this thing called the Tech Advisor Program, where every engineer who is marked as somebody who's on the promotion slate gets assigned a senior engineer as a buddy, as a mentor for a 6-month period. And this could be even somebody who's a very senior person who may get assigned a senior engineer as their buddy. And for 6 months, this person will coach them, will mentor them, will observe their work, and will help give them all the necessary inputs they need to be able to get to the next level. So we move the promotion process from being an evaluation to being more of a coaching journey that engineer goes through to be able to get to the next level. And we've seen some great kind of outcomes from that. Similarly, on career, we also look at career as development of skills. How do you help engineers get more skills? One of the interesting things we did was we partnered with Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, the ISC Institute, and we actually partnered with them to set up an online MTech program that we now have open to our employees. So this year, 6 of our Swiggy Tech employees are now actually actively enrolled in the online MTech program at the ISC. And this gives them employees, again, a way for them to be able to continuously grow their skills. And of course, we also have other trainings that we keep doing. And then, of course, the fourth thing, as Amit said, is compensation, which at this point is pretty much table stakes. You have to do it. But even there, you've got to think about what are the ways in which you help people unlock value faster. At Swiggy, as a company that's not public, we obviously have a constraint in how fast people can unlock their ESOPs. So one of the programs we did was this guaranteed liquidity program, where we ensured that every year for the next 2 years, people will have a minimum buyback of their stocks so that they can actually convert some of that stocks into wealth. So I think along these 4 dimensions we focused on, and I feel we've been also lucky in some sense that some of these things have taken effect. We've seen some really good results. We've doubled our tech team, in fact, over the last year and a half, and it's been a fascinating journey. I think it's definitely a work in progress for all of us. We're all learning. It's a new world, but some of the things that we've done have at least shown us some initial green shoots.
It's good to see there, right? So there are a few things. So I'm saying it's good to see some teams going through the industry, right? This process of like ESOP buybacks, right? I mean, a lot of companies are doing that, right? It's very encouraging to see. The problem that Dale highlighted of opaque process of promotion, that's actually very valid, right? Even at, for example, at Dream 11, we solved this by creating a concept of talent principles, right? So what we said that all the teams from bottom up, for every level in every function, creates a document of what is expectation of a level. It's like a bottom-up document, and the entire team concurs. And the concept of that document is you should be able to see and read it and evaluate and know where you are. So the discussion of where you are, whether you are at a certain level or not, actually, that subjectivity goes down drastically, and it's like a living document that keeps getting updated, and people can look at it and like really plan their careers in a very independent manner, and then exactly what's supposed to be done. So the expectations become like absolutely clear. So I think all these things are very important. I completely agree with you there.
Also, one more thing we need to understand, based on what Dale said and Amit said, earlier, the cycle of communication, which is very important, right, was happening at a very long cycle. Perhaps the one-to-one communication, the performance feedback, The expectation management was happening on a very, perhaps annual basis in most of the organizations, but I am seeing that there is a shift in that paradigm also. And now people are communicating more effectively, more frequently, to understand whether as an employer we are able to match the expectation of the employees or not, which is again a turntable, like I said in the beginning also, right? Which is very healthy trend, because now there is no communication gap. It's not like when you are sitting in the appraisal session, and at that time you are discussing, oh, entire year you did not do this, you did not do that, right? What were you doing as a manager in the entire year if you did not communicate this in the entire year, right? So these paradigms are also getting broken.
Very interesting, all the three of you. And, actually all this leads to one thing, that the organizational culture is becoming very employee centric. It's about people today. First, you think about people and then you think about the other things. There are a lot of audience questions piling up, but first I'd like to get Vinod in and then take a few audience questions. Vinod, everybody's talked about the importance of having a great organizational culture. We know the macro side of it. Now let's talk the micro side of it. Engineers look for employers that demonstrate a strong level of trust and respect for employees. For instance, no one likes to be micromanaged. What, according to you, are the building blocks of a solid organizational culture to attract the best engineers?
Hey, thanks everyone for being here. And a lot of super important questions coming in, and very apt and good points presented by everyone, right? And probably like what I say is also going to be along the same lines, but I'd like to kind of structure it a little bit to kind of give it a more formal framework, so to speak, right? So a lot of answers and a lot of suggestions that we have heard can kind of be well captured in the good old Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Basically, the question with which he started was, like, man lives by bread alone when there is no bread, right? But what happens to man's desires when there is plenty of bread, right? And this is the core question today the industry faces. And organizations that have a good answer to this will end up winning the talent race. So if I have to kind of elaborate a little bit, the most basic layer, right? The roti, kapda, makan layer, and which to our, this thing corresponds to compensation. Like everyone said, it's like a given, right? Like you have to stay competitive in the market. And I'm glad that stocks, ESOPs are now beginning to be understood as great vehicles for wealth creation, right? And especially for founding members who kind of join a startup at an early stage. And for example, at Goodworker, we give ESOPs for all the employees, including freshers, and the competitive base as well, right? And these are table stakes, like everyone was saying. And the next layer is like sense of stability, predictability. A lot of candidates, engineers I speak to have this question about stability around startups. And it's a very genuine concern. And startups, executional maturity, the runway they have, right? And the attention they give to kind of grow your career. All of these are like going to reassure prospective engineers. And for example, like Goodworker is backed by Temasek, which is one of the biggest PE firms out there. And they have a longer term commitment in backing us. So some of these things probably kind of give that sense of stability to engineers, right? Next up basically is about belongingness, culture, like everyone was talking about. It's a welcome change in our Indian startup ecosystem, right? To see like everyone emphasizing on culture. Startups in India, especially like a few years ago, used to be very execution driven. And there is like now very overwhelming research consensus in the industry that organizations that prioritize employees' well-being, nurtures their careers, have a collaborative culture, right? These tend to see lower attritions, and also like engineers tend to become more productive than in a high stress, high pressure environment. So some of these things drive great culture, cultivate kind of growth mindset in employees, right? So that they can kind of put forth their perspectives and not be afraid of failing in their experiments and things like that. Next, there will be like things like recognition, autonomy, status, right? So this is where I think the point that you mentioned about micromanagement comes into picture. So organizations will need to have a right model around autonomy, accountability, rewards, recognitions in place, right? And there are like so many nuances to this. Different organizations kind of fine-tune in various ways. Like Amit was explaining how they do it at Dream11, right? So it's super critical for great talent to give their best. And startups can do better here actually, because we need less centralization and more decentralization. And it's great to see Swiggy talking about more empowerment, autonomy, to kind of having self-empowered teams, the whole Spotify squad model, so to speak, right? So teams need to be like kind of empowered to do their experimenting and take their own decisions. And the startups who get this right start growing tremendously, because they are going to leverage full potential of their employees. And fortunately for us at Goodworker, we have leaders with very diverse backgrounds leading various functions, which makes it quite unique, because we are not a founder-led organization. We don't have founders. And we are a purpose-driven company backed by Lemaitre that invests in technologies of the future. And that's the ultimate icing when we look at the hierarchy of needs, right? Purpose and self-fulfillment. So people want to create meaningful impact. They want their work to kind of change people's lives at scale. And they want to kind of realize their full potential, break barriers, work on cutting edge technology, innovate, and a bold vision helps, right? So for example, at Goodworker, we aim to kind of improve the livelihoods of 300 million plus blue collar workforce in India and beyond. Our focus is not as much on vanity metrics, but on longer term horizon, creating meaningful partnerships, creating meaningful impact on the ground, right? And especially for Indian engineers, this is an opportunity to kind of solve some of the most complex, unique challenges that some of our fellow Indians face. I hope that sums it up.
Very interesting, Vinod. Thank you for taking us through this entire descriptive, feel-good story of Goodworker. I'll take one audience question right now. So Pushpinder is asking that what happens is that sometimes the current employees can't take the advantage of, rising compensation in the market. So if you go to a new employer, probably you will get more what you would get with your old employer. So how do you solve for that? Anybody can take it.
I can take it if you want.
Yes.
So I think that's absolutely valid, right? So I think, so at Dream11, what we do is our compensation is designed mark to market, right? So we have moved away from that traditional system of, bell curves and increments and total budgets of increments, etc., right? It doesn't matter. So principally what we do is every appraisal, we just look at each and every single person in the team as a new hire. And we're like, and then, as based on the talent principles document that I talked about, we are able to level the person. Okay, you're at this level, at this proficiency. And once that, and then what we do is, on the other hand, we do an intense 3-month exercise before every appraisal where we do a full market compensation analysis, work with some agencies. Our TA team also gets data, and we look at all of that data. Then maybe we correct it a little bit for Mumbai as a location where we are, right? It's a little more expensive. We do all of that. So we create a benchmarking of sorts for every level, right? And then we look at every single person that we have, and based on their level, we actually give them the compensation that they should be at. So what does this result in? Some people end up getting a increment of 5-10%, which is like traditional, but the max appraisal and the max increment that we've given to someone at Dream11 is 200%, right? I mean, there was a guy that we once bumped from 10 lakhs to 30 lakhs, basically, in one appraisal, because we don't care about the rise, right? What we care about is, what if today you went out in the market and tried to get an opportunity, how much the market would value you at, and then based on that, we give you your compensation. So I think that's how we attempt to actually solve it.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I think the way I guess most companies have moved to is to look at it in terms of pay bands, right? And as Amit was saying, the pay band keeps moving as the market moves up. And so the only difference, I guess, in companies is how often do people review those pay bands. And that's where some companies do it maybe once a year, some companies do it maybe in our case, we even do it once in 6 months, because right now the market is moving so fast that we did a pay revision in April, and we're doing another one now in October, just so that we continue to be one of the say top with pay masters in the ecosystem that we operate in. And I think in some sense, I think people have moved away from that old world of saying, I will hire people at a different salary based on where they've come from. So hopefully, to your question, Pushpender, I'm hoping that you're not in a company where your company looks at you as somebody who has come in at a different salary, should be getting X. It should really be based on the contribution you're making, the role you're performing, the level at which you're performing. And based on that, you should ideally be placed at a market competitive rate, irrespective of whether you have joined your company fresh or if you've been in the company for 5 years.
Vivek?
Yeah, I will go back to square one. What I mean by that is, let us understand that this entire problem of resource crunch started because companies are not letting their top talent go. So if the pay parity was a concern, that existing employees are not being taken care, but the new employees are given higher compensation, then this problem would not start in the first place, right? But that is not the case. I think when we were talking about the wealth creation, so do you think that the wealth creation is only for the new hires? Answer is no. At least at Verse, I can tell you, every single employee has been taken care from the top to the bottom. Doesn't matter how junior, how new, how old you are. Everybody is taken care when it comes to the wealth creation and other benefits also, right? Now, yes, this is true that when you are talking about month on month, you cannot match the market. It is not going to happen month on month. Like Dale said, he's doing it every 6 months, right? So you have to identify that what is the viability for your organization to retain the talent and to hire and attract new talent. And based on that, you define a cycle, whether you are going to do it quarterly, 6 monthly, or annually only. Even when you are doing it annually, you will take good care of them, right? Not a traditional 5, 10%, 20% kind of thing. So that depends on the organizations. And again, like I will say, it is not only about compensation, guys. Let us understand. Compensation is just one factor why people change their jobs. If I'm not wrong, culture is still the biggest reason people change. And in culture also, if you dig deeper, it is the manager people leave, not the jobs, right? Yeah. So what are you doing about that? Are you training your people manager to take care of the people? A lot of time, I will tell you, perhaps this is a bit off topic, but please understand, I have seen a massive gap that often those people are promoted as people manager who were very good in their tech jobs. They were doing a wonderful job as a tech engineer or as a tech manager. They were promoted because in India, this is a tradition that, okay, you need a promotion, so you will not become a research fellow or you will not become a tech fellow, rather you will become a people manager. But did they have the people manager in their DNA? And if not, then what did organization do to put them there? If they are not trained, if they are not skilled, if they are not competent on the people management skills, trust me, people will continue to leave jobs and you will continue hiring. We proudly say that in our organization, 60% plus organization is more than 5+ years. Out of that also around 30% population is 10+ years. Imagine, so people don't leave per se innovation, our organization. We are known for our apps like Josh and Telehunt. Why don't they leave? Like Amit was saying earlier, it is all about culture. Like Dale was saying, it is all about communication. What is there in your DNA? Are you identifying what is letting your people go? How many organizations have you seen take exit interviews seriously? Do they analyze that trend? Have they started using the technology to analyze why their people are leaving? Let us say if it's a single-digit attrition also, but why are people leaving? What in the first place prompted them to look for an opportunity outside? Are you not giving them enough opportunity inside? Right?
Yes.
A lot of these questions.
Valid points, Vivek. Vinod, do you want to make a point?
Yeah. So the root cause of this question, right, is this sense of fairness, right? Like people want to see that company treating them fairly, right? And not just jumping to new engineers, new talent in the market and not valuing the people who are already like contributing to grow the company, right? So it's just about that. And it's about addressing that. And definitely like there are so many things we can't change. We can't change our neighbors, we can't change our parents, but we can definitely change our employers. compensation is like table stakes. So everyone has to calibrate, everyone has to meet the benchmarks. Yeah.
So we've also answered the question of Kumar Narayana. The next point we would like to cover is that, how do you show a person who's coming for an interview, the vision, the vision for career development? That becomes very difficult. So this is for both kind of viewers that we may have in this show today, hiring managers, as well as the ones who are looking for new jobs. So this will benefit both these groups. If you can share some insights on, how an hiring manager can show what your career development can be in the next 3 to 5 years in a job interview. Amit, would you like to take that?
Sure. Let me start by saying, I think interviewing someone is one of the hardest skill there is. And I think most people get it wrong. Different people have tried different models. It's just very difficult to nail it down. And I think the biggest mistake that people make when interviewing a candidate is they focus on their needs and what they are actually needing from that person, and not focusing on the person's strengths, on what they have, on what they are good at. Right. I think that's one thing that I wanted to say now. So when you are interviewing someone, when you're talking to a person, it's very important for you to focus on their achievements, their accomplishments, their strengths, because that gives you an idea about their potential. And at the end of the day, in an interview, all you're judging, according to me, is their potential and the culture fit. So, both of these things are there. You get them in, and I'm pretty sure that they'll be able to get anything done. As far as, career development and the 3-5 year, the question that you said, right, Patrick, to be honest, I think all of this should be thought of way before the interview, right? So every single person that you're trying to hire in a particular team or to do certain things, you need to, as an organization, sit together and figure out where are we hiring. For example, at Dream11, we have to plot a 2-year org chart of every single position that we want to hire. That today this person is here. Where will this person be next year? Where will this person be in 2 years? Right? How will this person grow? What is the area? So you have to think through in the future and make sure there are enough opportunities for that person, have a job in mind, what they're going to do, etc. And I think, but on the other hand, recently a candidate asked me this question, if I join Dream11, what is the problem that you want me to solve immediately? What is the first thing that you want me to do? Which project will I be put in? And my answer to that candidate is that probably shouldn't be the criteria for you to join or not join. So I explained to him just before that, I had explained to him plethora of complex problems, that we want to solve as an organization, right? In the function that I was actually interviewing for. And there were like a bunch of them, right? In our product engineering side, how are we going to innovate our product, to give more features to our users, etc. On the platform and infrastructure side of things, how are we building platform components? And then at our scale, we cannot even rely on vendors for a lot of these technologies, right? So we decided to in-house everything, the data platforms of the world, the ML platforms, the cloud platforms, etc. Right? For example, so I explained to him the entire spectrum of complex problems, what our vision is. I told him that as long as you are sold on the vision, there will always be something interesting for you to do. And we can actually do a matchmaking, right, of what you want to do and, and of all the problems, right? So focus on the long-term path and don't try to decide don't make a decision based on the short-term, the first thing that you're going to do for me, for example. So I think to summarize, the path for a person has to be thought before the interview starts, and you tell them exactly what is the vision, right? What is the vision of the function? What is the vision of the company? And what are the complex challenges that this person will get a part to play in and solve, and how that will actually lead to his growth, level to level, and as well as, on the technical side of things.
Yeah,
yes, Pooja, one more thing I would like to add. What is the growth path? Do we tell the candidates during the interview process or before that even? That I think most of the time I have seen that people will just share the job description document with them, and then they will not even bother to check whether the expectation management has been done or not, right? We also share the growth path with them that, okay, if you are being hired for this position, what are the horizontal options? What are the vertical options open for you growth? And that I think really helps when it comes to the tech stack. I mean, I'm talking about the technology because we're talking about the engineers here. So I'm focusing on that part, that what is the technology stack that you will be working on? See, we get billions of hits on our platform every day. Okay. That means a very large level of infrastructure problems, very complex level of problems need to be addressed. Okay. Scalability is a big thing for us. And we need people, like Amit said, that we need people to think not just on one piece of the problem, but on how do they fit into the entire machinery as a cogwheel. That if they stop, the entire thing will stop, and if they move smoothly, they function smoothly. How will it help the function and the organization as a whole? There is I think if I'm not wrong, around 10-11 years back, a decade-old video is there of Simon Sinek. Okay, if you see that, he very clearly says that leaders need to tell why it is important what you are doing, not what you are going to do. Do we tell people why are they going to do it? We just tell them, okay, do this, what you are supposed to do that, not why you are doing it, what impact it will create on the organization. I think that also needs to be communicated somewhere, and as soon as you do it in the early stages of hiring process, better it is.
Dale?
All right. I just want to also take the conversation into a different direction, because I know we've talked a lot about compensation. That's a key part of what people discuss during interviews. I think the other phenomenon that also is very prevalent right now is title inflation, where people are jumping because they look for titles, and they look for new titles and fancy titles. And it seems that career growth is equal to title inflation, right? So there's almost a proxy that people say that if I've gone from being a manager to a senior manager, I'm growing. And it doesn't matter if you've gone from manager in a complex role to a senior manager in a smaller role, the titles makes you feel happier about things. So I think one thing which I've learned, and I guess I learned this in Amazon when I was starting out very early, this was something that I was told by my mentor back in the day. When I was in this situation, I was evaluating different roles, and I was looking at a role which had a fancy title, and I was looking at a role that basically seemed very ambiguous, very scary because it could fail, but it seemed interesting. And my initial take was to look at the safe role because it had the big title. Then I spoke to this mentor I had, and he told me this line. He said, focus on accomplishments, titles will follow. And this has stuck with me for, I guess, forever since I heard that line, because what it meant basically is, as a individual, as a tech in this world, there's so much opportunity. I think the key thing you need to look for when you're interviewing at companies is to say, what accomplishment can I go and do in this place? What is that meaningful accomplishment that I can either build, leave behind, that legacy that I can create? And if I can do that, the title, the compensation, the wealth will all follow. It's just a matter of time. And that has been true for me for my career over the last 20 plus years. The role I was considering then, actually, which was supposed to be scary and completely ambiguous, was actually the role for international expansion for Amazon. And I went on to eventually lead engineering for Amazon India from that point, right? And at that point, if I had chosen to go the safe route and taken the big role, I probably would have been doing something else, but would not have been sitting here talking to all of you. So I do feel like when you think about interviewing, when you talk to people, both as a hiring manager as well as the person interviewing, I think it's very important for us to move away from compensation and titles to focus on accomplishments and focus on the opportunity that you as an individual can either sell to the candidate, or you as a candidate can actually be able to do, so that if you were to leave the company in 2-3 years, what can you look back at? What can you be so proud about that you can go tell your friends and family that I built that? And I think that's a super important part for people to, I feel, focus on during these conversations.
Yeah, in the continuing the same point, can we pinpoint as to what engineers today want from their jobs? I mean, how they can make a difference? You've talked about legacy, leaving behind a legacy, talked about challenges, but what is that, appeals to them with respect to technology and work?
Innovation. Technology stack. Yeah.
I'd say founder mentality. I mean, I would say that at heart, every good engineer, every good techie is an entrepreneur, right? Even if you're building a piece of code, that code is basically creation. Code for me is not science, it is part science, part art. Writing a great piece of code is inspirational. If you write a piece of code that actually does work beautifully, it's actually a piece of work and a piece of art, right? In some sense, if you give engineers or even tech leaders space to be entrepreneurs, be it in building a small platform where they can think completely big and really change the game, or be it in setting up a small team and actually starting a new company, or even helping a company scale. All of these places are basically opportunities for people to bring founder mentality to the table. And I feel companies that encourage founder mentality, companies that actually value entrepreneurship, are those companies which will I feel, get great talent towards them.
Very well said.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And we should also remember that, that engineering is also not like that one type, right? There's a very diverse group, right? I mean, like there are engineers who love working on with product and design and delivering things and small features, delivering quick things and getting it out there. And there are people who like to go very, very deep into things, right? Not every person wants the same thing. So it's very important to identify based on interest and personality, right? What is the best alignment? Because if you put a wrong person in the wrong profile, he may be good, but he may not succeed and he may just not be satisfied. And sometimes even at an early stage of their career, even they are unsure of what their strengths are and where they want to be. And they may get pulled towards, more technical roles or something, for example, because, that's where the learning is. But deep down, it may not be best fit for them, so you have to have those conversations and really make them think, what do you want to do in the future? Where do you see yourself a few years from now? Are you a leader? Do you want to be a principal engineer? How long do you want to be an IC for? Do you want to do people management? Do you want to learn those skills? Don't chase people management because you think that is the only way of growth, because that's not, right? So you need to really understand those things as well. And as founder mentality, as Dale said, it's very important that you need to know that your founder gets it, right? Like, I'll give you a quick example. So technical debt is a hot topic, right? I mean, all engineers fight because they want to solve technical debt and they have to convince, and it's a battle in every company. Now, we've tried to inculcate various, within our process itself to actually solve it, and then keep allocation time. But, we are a fast growing business. Let's face it, right? There's always an IPL for us coming up. We're going to have like millions of users concurrently on our platform. We need to be ready for scale. So sometimes we miss out on things. But what's important is that as an organization, we recognize the importance of cleaning technical debt. So once a year for a period of time, whether it's 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, we decide based on that, the entire company, or what I mean is the entire tech product design, we halt our feature development. And then we go deep into technical debt and we clean it up. And that actually gives us velocity for the rest of the year, which more than compensates for the time that we've actually lost. So, that now that the team knows that, that this company, they actually understand engineers. They understand that, okay, this is a real problem for engineers. And this is how, we don't want to do redundant work. We don't want to keep working on the same thing. So give us time to actually clean it up. So this understanding is very important. And that's where then people get comfortable. Again, part of the culture, right? Decentralized decision making and all of that goes back to the same bucket.
I'll just take one or two audience questions. Should software engineers stick to one particular domain while switching, or is it okay to explore multiple domains? Vinod, you'd like to take this one?
Yeah, so there are pros and cons, right, on this particular thing. For example, I have always dabbled on so many different things. I think like it helps exploring more to kind of grow as a professional, mostly because you get so many dots to kind of connect, and a lot of value creation, a lot of disruption in the market is in those spaces that kind of connect the dots, right? And not, and there definitely is scope for going deep in a particular thing, but that would depend on like what's the scope of going deep in the company that you're working in as well. And a lot of companies, I think, when they mature and become a lot more bigger, tend to kind of start investing in deeper tech. And it's encouraging to kind of see a lot of open source contribution happening from Indian startups. That's a good sign for like people to kind of go beyond their work and kind of explore, contribute to the community work, all of that. So yeah, I would vote more on like diversifying so that your perspective broadens, you connect more dots, and you find areas for disruption, right? There is scope for a lot of cross learning, a lot of things that backend, for example, there are the patterns in backend can be brought into front end and vice versa, right? To kind of simplify things, to kind of disrupt the way of looking at something, bring fresh perspectives and all that. Yeah.
So I think the one of the most popular needs that I've seen in most companies is they're looking for T-shaped people, right? So they want people with one, like, expertise, depth in one area, but like exposure to as many other areas as possible. So if you ask me, if you can like choose to develop that, I think that's one of the strongest value propositions that you can provide to your organization, I believe. Yeah, Dale, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that I think as an engineer, you need to separate out the concepts from the application languages. I think that's one place where people often confuse things. For example, as an engineer, it is not super important for you to know the syntax of Java, because today you have IDEs, you have interfaces where you can look up every single syntax. What is more important for you to know is basically the concepts of how do you build, say, multi-threaded programs. How do you build low latency serverless applications, right? Now, when you think about building a multi-threaded service, now there, the construct of how you manage and build that service is more important than whether you're building it in Java, whether you're building it in Golang, whether you're building it in Scala, or so on. So for example, at Swiggy, we use Java, we use Scala, we use Golang. So an engineer may be programming across different languages based on which system they are building. But what is more important is in all those languages, the engineer's depth in understanding how they build an extremely highly performant service or highly resilient service, fault tolerancy, all of that is super important. So I would say build depth in the concept while be breadth in the technology and the application languages.
So the mantra today is jack of all trades and master in one. So, most people follow that for the career advice. One more audience question is that in the engineering talent realm, do people judge you if you've been with an MNC just for 1 year and then you're hopping job? Would you kind of find the person very fickle-minded or something?
It depends on the reason, Pooja. See, why did you change? Okay. If you changed because you know what you are doing, because you are focused, it may make sense. But if you're just hunting for just to get your pay package higher, I mean, yes, employers are, smart people too. They will figure it out, right? And then you may not be hired if that is not a very desperate situation for the employer to hire you, right? But yes, it depends. I have seen candidates who came particularly looking for, not for a higher role, but for wider vision. That, okay, I want to work on this technology stack and you are offering that. And I want to come out of what I am doing right now, though it has been only one year in my previous organization, but I always wanted to work on this. I was promised this, but in my current organization, that is not going to happen. So is it okay? And we talked.
So,
also the startup space is also becoming a lot more, people are developing a lot more confidence in the startup space, right? The innovation, right? So I think a lot of people who are not willing to go into this space and were making MNCs for stability, etc., because of the traditional system, now are actually questioning that, and they're willing to take that bet, right, and risk. So I think a lot of that transition is also happening, which is actually also very good for the ecosystem. I think because we've hired some really good people from MNCs, right? And I think our interview process is completely transparent. It doesn't matter where you come from, right? As long as you clear the interviews, we'll get you in. But then culture fit is where it becomes difficult because they're used to a certain way of thinking. So we also test for that how adaptable this person can be and can he actually move, right? Like I recently hired an AVP in my front-end team who's actually been in like a services SaaS kind of a mindset for 15 years, right? And the biggest question was how will he adapt? But when you probe, when you talk, right, you see that it's possible that even within that services-based company, the way he was operating, the way he was making decision making to the best.
So more often than now, employers rush job seekers to accept offers quickly. What would be your advice to engineers on leveraging job offers from multiple employers? Vinod?
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of give my own perspective, right? Like I'm personally driven by purpose and I'm very picky about workplace culture. I look for places where there is a lot of learning, great scope for creating impact, right? And that's what got me to Good Worker from Microsoft. So what I'll tell engineers is that compensation is important, but move beyond the numbers to kind of have a more holistic view of what's actually on offer, right? Move beyond the labels of startups, FANGs, MNCs, all of these, right? Because when we say startup, what we usually mean is moving faster, innovating, you get more responsibility, more learning, right? And every company kind of aspires to have these aspects. And the FANGs of the world kind of have been at the forefront of some of these things, right? So I would urge engineers to kind of move beyond the labels, and everything is a spectrum, right? And so do your research about the company before you apply. Find your own sweet spot. There is no like global optimal thing. Like identify what's important for you and must have for you, right? look at places like where you'll have your peace of mind, places that kind of prioritize your well-being, places that kind of challenge you to kind of bring your authentic self, give your best, where there are like interesting challenges to solve, where there is like a lot of autonomy, trust, where you can kind of take decisions, create that impact, all of that, right? For example, like our group CEO is Glenn Gore. He used to be chief architect at AWS Amazon. And we have an ecosystem of thought leaders, awesome engineers from across the globe who we kind of regularly soundboarding with. And we are quite a unique startup in terms of our own genesis, structure, makeup. So it kind of makes things a little interesting for engineers to get that wider exposure. Just wanted to add a couple more points on the earlier question as well. Like this is like gone is the time when like people used to spend 20 years, 30 years in an organization, right? The question was more about like, is it wrong if a person moves in less than a year, right? I think just like technology and all that, like not being like very stack driven and all of that, like just getting the basics right. I would encourage engineers to kind of explore, and this new generation is all about exploring and is very commitment phobic as well, right? So it's, I think, like good for engineers to kind of be exposed to various ways in which companies operate and how employees are treated. So I think like more power to engineers, right? And if the market is right, go for it. Yeah, that's what I would like to say.
I would actually disagree with that though. And just to bring up a counter or a contrarian point of view, though, I would say as an engineer, I mean, I think what is, and I go back to my thing about accomplishments, I think a good thought experiment for people when you talk about this 2-year thing is to say, why don't you write your resume where you completely remove the time that you've spent in a company and write a simple one-sheet resume where you basically talk of the accomplishments you've done over your career. That's it. Don't bother writing whether you spent 6 months in an MNC, whether you spent 2 years, whether you spent 10 years. Just go through a thought experiment of writing the accomplishments you've done and look at that piece of paper and see if whether what you've written actually sounds like something you would be proud about. And I think that's what I would optimize for. If, for example, if you can do something crazy great in 6 months and you feel good about it, do it and move on. Perfect. But if for some reason, if it takes you 6 years to build something amazing, then spend the time. Do not use time as the reason to move jobs. Instead, look at saying, what meaningful accomplishment have I done? And is it time for me to go do something different? So I would completely get away from this entire resume of saying how many years you've spent in which company and so on, to say, remove titles, remove names, remove numbers, and just tell me by accomplishment, what have you done over your last few years? And then let's talk about whether that's a good fit for us.
Pooja, I would add
kind of
one
like
point
agree
here.
with what Dale said. Like, sorry, Vivek, like just
Go
to
ahead.
kind of wrap up that whole thing, right? I agree with what Dale says. Like, time doesn't matter, right? So the question of like moving on too quickly or too like staying at a place is kind of immaterial. And I think like it's important to look at engineers of tomorrow as beyond tech, right? Like beyond people who understand how to operate some tools, right? As a more holistic person, as a better professional. And that from that perspective, I think it's good for engineers if they get a wider perspective. Yeah.
What Vinod and Dale both said strengthens my belief in the statement that from the traditional experience-based or tenure-based hiring, we have entered into the era of skill-based hiring. Right? It is no more about how many companies you have hopped. Yes, it does matter because, like I said, what was your reason to move, right? Because we also do not want that company invest, and we invest a lot on the training, certification, and growing people up. Nobody wants certainly that when we are investing so much on the people, and then they do not stay with you beyond a certain time period. So, but yes, skills are important. And what skills did you add in your previous job and before that and all that? If you can just mention, I would rather say, Dale, I'm challenging your thought process here, that instead of the name of the organization, if you just say, okay, year this to this, I got this done and I gained this skill, I would be more than happy to see that kind of maturity in a candidate, to put it that way, right? And it will be an interesting conversation to have as well.
But are the employers so mature? Are the employers so mature to go, with just that, with the anonymous?
We are doing it. We are doing it, Pooja. I mean, I don't want to name, but I recently had a couple of people who came, freshers engineers. I'm telling you, I'm seeing a dramatic difference in the freshers of the previous years and now. they are coming focused, they are certified, they know what they are doing, and they're asking very specifically, do you have this technology stack? Do you, what, like earlier Amit was saying, no, what is your technical debt, right? They are concerned about that. And if you are getting such a focused workforce, I mean, trust me, your life is going to be easy.
Interesting, very interesting. So with that, we come to the end of this session. We could have gone for longer. We had very interesting discussions, and a lot of interesting points did come out. One of them is that, engineers are not going to hop jobs solely because of compensation. I think that is way down their priority list. On top is culture, purpose, what they're going to work on, the team, and also you leave jobs because of managers. I think it's high time we stop using the word managers and we call them something like enablers or mentors. The term manager itself, has a connotation that means that you are managing somebody. You don't need manager. You need a
At Dreamland,
mentor.
we call them captains, by the way.
Okay, interesting.
It's a
Everything
sports-
to do with
sports.
sports.
Everything to do with sports.
Interesting.
We also have dream teams, like how they said teams, we have dream teams.
So it's really interesting to know there's so much innovation happening, and startups are actually kind of, pacing other organization with these kind of innovations. It's synonym to innovation, startups, from employee management, talent management to innovative products. So really great speaking to all of you. And thank you so much. The audience would be walking away with great takeaways. It has been really an insightful session. Thank you from ETHR World and our co-producer of this program, Good Worker. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Pooja. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Pooja.